G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day. You've had a fantastic weekend and leading into a great beginning of this week. Now, I apologise that I've had a couple of days off, but I haven't been having beers on the beach and enjoying myself. I've been incredibly unwell. That said, I do apologise, as I do know a lot of people do like getting the news from myself, and I've been trying to keep up, but sometimes it is very, very difficult. So today, legends, we have a lot to talk about. I want to talk about the North Koreans. I want to talk about some propaganda backfires and some very, very hard truths that people are going to have to come to terms with. Of course, we're going to look at the maps. We're going to look over, is this month advancement faster or slower than last month, as well as over the past 3 days. We'll look at what has been moving. I also want to go over a speech that NATO Secretary Mark Rutte has made, and basically saying that NATO is behind where Russia and China are, and that NATO needs to prepare for war now, as the position in a few years is going to be very dire. So I want to go over exactly what was said in that, but interlinking with that, I want to go over a podcast that I listened to and took notes on between Professor Mearsheimer and philosopher Alexander Dugin, of course, a very, very divisive character. But I want to go over what has been said there, because you get that perspective, and that's something I want to share too, of maybe how he sees it, maybe how many see it on the other side of the coin. You're going to have to bear with me, because the biggest thing I dealt with last time is what people often refer to as chemo brain. Slow word recall, very poor memory. And to be fair, this lasted about 2 years. At the end of my last treatment is when I really noticed an uptick better. So yeah, but let's get into it. I've got my vomit bucket ready to go. It's underneath my desk. And I will say I'm going to miss a lot in the video today. And over the weekend, what I've missed, when I missed the videos, I've been really, really sick. This was round 1, and I was really hoping that this would not happen. Because as the drug, the medication gradually saturates your body over the 12 months of treatment, it's going to get worse and worse. And not only the time of the saturation, but round 1 is a significantly lower dose. So I don't know how this is going to look, but I'll do my very best. Multiple oncologists, and I've had 2nd, 3rd, 4th opinions on this, and they have also reached out to other oncologists because they are surprised at how my body rejects this medication and have been shocked at how unwell I become. So I would be lying if I said the whole situation isn't incredibly mentally draining, because I spent a lot of my early 20s doing chemo, then the recovery, and then the spicy flu came in and shut me down more so than the tumour chemotherapy did for some reason. And then it's seeming like the end of my 20s is going to be the same. At 12 months' time is when I'll be finishing, and it takes about 2 years from my last experience for the fog to clear out of my brain. So however we go, we will go. And for those complete smooth brain idiots that believe I'm getting paid by some state from somewhere, sometimes I wish I was, because then I wouldn't have to grind every day to try and make something to pay my rent. But I appreciate you guys being here, and I really appreciate all that you have given me and listening to myself. So let's start with this North Korean thing. Now, the threshold of evidence for North Koreans in combat is the threshold of my mates at the pub with a shit pickup line to a 6. It's so low. It is these soldiers in open order march walking across a field here, black dots against the snow, but you can see how much snow that there is. And a shell landing, not really, from what I'm seeing, taking out many of these guys. Now, people have said the movement here, again, from an infantry background, depending on the armour or other assets you have, moving across an open field like this, shit, your spacing could be better, but the longer your spacing, the harder it is to then get certain elements into the fight. But what I'm pointing at is this is not evidence. This is not evidence that North Koreans are fighting. There's been some rumours and some talking for months now that North Koreans are walking off the front line in masses. They're being killed that many that, you know, people are running out of bullets and that. And now there's pages saying, oh, the first time they've been into combat. You're like, well, what is it? And it's never propaganda, it's never misinformation, it's never disinformation, it's never anything to ask for evidence. And we have other footage here. You can see the snow on the ground, the turret of a T-series tank, and you see an amount of body, 23 corpses lying on the ground here. Now, people are saying this is all North Korean. Some are saying it's a mix of North Koreans and Russians. And what I'll say is it's impossible to verify this as evidence of North Koreans. You can't see anything in this. And I just say use your head. Like, Russia has a massive amount of people that look Asian in their population. A massive amount of Russia is in Asia. Like, North Koreans coming in, yeah, I'm fairly positive they're being trained, maybe have stepped into combat, but using this as evidence, think about the threshold the other way. If it was South Koreans fighting for Ukraine, what evidence would you expect if that claim was made? Well, it's got to be the other way. It's ridiculous, the lack of threshold of this, because like I've said, it's being used, the ghost of Pyongyang, as an informational part first. Will we see them enter combat? And evidence of that, I think likely, maybe. I've said that for a while. Will it make a huge difference? No. But again, we will see. And this leads me into my next part I wanted to talk about, which was from this, one of my favourite bloggers online, Tatarigami UA. And I guess some feedback that he has got through his community too. Now, I'd love to interview Tatarigami UA anonymous, however he'd like to do it, but I can't find a good way to get in touch. If anyone can do that, please. But this is basically what was tweeted out. Ukraine's failure to fix organisational issues and replace inefficient commanders has eroded trust in the system to the point where severe recruitment shortages and desertion levels are so high that no amount of aid can fix it. The window of opportunity to change is closing. Now, of course, people will point at him for being like a propagandist, being on the other side, but fighting for Putin. And what I say is sunlight is the best disinfectant with everything in this. That sometimes the most pro-Ukrainian guys are the ones calling out the issues that would actually make a difference, not just pushing blame somewhere maybe onto the US. And that is fair, but you can't ignore everything else. Just to add, there's no doubt that limited and delayed aid, along with indecisiveness, played a significant role in this. However, if the war ends under very unfavourable conditions, simply blaming Biden won't fix the situation, but internal changes can. And this is the truth, whether you like it or not. This may be the hard truth that many need to hear, because sunlight's the best disinfectant, and maybe things will start to change. Is there time for that? I don't think so, with Trump coming into power and the movements on the battlefield, but we will see. Now, he says here, as recruitment shortages and desertion levels, there are people saying that there are hundreds to thousands of Ukrainian mobilised soldiers walking off the line currently, as well as potentially in France. Also, I was going to do some digging into that, but again, grain of salt at this point. I'll do some more over the next coming days. But then he's put up a response to this from a NAFO account. What a defeatist prick you are. And I would hazard a guess that Ted is not fighting in Ukraine. He's fighting what's NAFO's thing, the war on Russian disinformation online, which the NAFO thing has spread from that to just spreading disinformation or just doxing people. Anyway, and I'll talk about this, but I will say it's like he's read my mind in here. A relatively common, though unhelpful, faction within the pro-Ukrainian community reflexively responds to internal criticism. Criticism are usually voiced with care and restraint, or denial, or at times unhinged aggression. The reality, however, is that I've been more often right than wrong about fundamental issues and the trajectory of this war. Many problems related to training, organisation and poor decision-making were issues I highlighted as far back as 22 and early as 23. As we approach 2025, these problems are now visible to almost everyone. The truth is, the best time to address them was then, not now, when window for meaningful change is closing. You have no idea how many times I've been pinned, or Tatarigami UA has been pinned as a Putin propagandist, or this or that. Because if you actually spoke about corruption, manpower, realistic goals, you were painted as that, even if it was these problems you were looking at back then, going, if that's fixed, you'd have better outcomes, but it's being painted with all the same brush. Criticism aimed at solving problems and redirecting efforts is mischaracterised as pessimism or defeatism by a blind cheerleading. But pointing out the uncomfortable truths is not the same as declaring all hope is lost. If Ukraine is forced into an unfavourable peace, it will not be your families, friends or loved ones who remain in a defeated country. So, again, a lot of these people who could have gone and signed the dotted line, whether they had military backgrounds or not, you could have done that, but plenty of guys have gone there with zero training to fight. They're not the ones who are going to be living in this, and they're just cheerleading on all the good, never looking at the bad and things that would make a huge difference. Look at the interviews I've conducted with guys, and they're saying we just need more men, we need good fortifications, we need to fix the corruption. That's what everyone's been saying. I've been doing interviews since 2022, early days, saying that they were the problems, and that's never been addressed. And if you address that or you ask about that, instantly you're a propagandist on the other side fighting that, apparently. A defeated country, a buffer zone with one of the lowest GDPs per capita and little future. It will be mine. Blind cheerleading leads to delusional expectations, such as predictions of Ukrainian troops entering Crimea in 2023, while preventing necessary reforms and realistic assessments. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. For example, saying that Ukraine failed to construct proper defences behind Avdiivka while the city was being encircled was not panic or defeatism. I made a sober and correct assessment of the situation. Many later witnessed the consequences. Similarly, noting the lack of forces and manpower stretching all the way to Pokrovsk, which enabled Russian troops to capture multiple towns with minimal resistance. This was not a pessimistic outburst, but a correct analytical prediction, whether people liked it or not. And in my opinion, the longer this war has gone on, the blind cheerleading has had a massive negative effect. And those that have tried to call out these issues, whether it's myself, Tataragami UA, have been painted as don't listen to it, propaganda, whatever. But what I will say is guys like him, and I'd put myself in this basket, have been more correct about situations than incorrect about situations, because you're looking at it realistically, not idealistically. I also believe that it's its own worst enemy, the online community, who Tataragami says, you're not going to be living in this, but we will be. And it has turned, the online community has turned so many away due to the actions of this online. Seeing how the doxing, the this, the that, not fighting back against this disinformation, but just fighting individuals or spreading its own misinformation, disinformation. But I think more so on top of that is the pointing out of, oh, look what's happening here, but also having a completely sadistic view towards footage of maybe, say, and you see this tens of times, at least I do every day, of sadistic footage dropping, drone on a surrendering soldier, complete war crime, but then spreading this, laughing at it, adding music, justifying a crime here. And that like sadistic nature there, I think, turns so many people away from that side. It's not they mean turn the other way. It's people going, I just don't want to be any part of this. And people go, Russia's doing horrific things, but look at this and look how this is celebrated. I'm not going to support anything in here. Again, I think it's having a huge backfire. The first step toward meaningful change is acknowledging problems in their early stages, not when it's already too late to act. And in my opinion, especially on the manpower corruption command front, it is far too late. Like I've said, I think those reforms, I've never worked in the government, in reforming a government, but that's going to take years. Manpower, from my experience of getting guys from civilian to a level that can conduct offensive level operations, I couldn't see that being any less. If you're a bare bones civilian with good fitness, no injuries, which is not that many really, and you're young, at minimum 8 or 9 months, but you're going to need tens to hundreds of thousands of that if they're highly motivated already, because infantry training is very, very hard. Now, we'll have a look at the maps, and I just want to show you this. We've talked about some serious stuff, and we always talk about serious stuff, but this is funny. I've named this the Crusty Vans, for those who are well aware of the Crusty Demons motorcycles from back in the day. Russian motorcycle assault troops, and then when I was a kid growing up on a farm, have done exactly that on a Honda CR80. The best motorcycle to ever exist, by the way. But, sorry. Let's have a look at the maps and see where things are changing. And we have a couple of days, of course, to go over. This is why it's a bit more difficult if you leave it a couple of days. But this is what I have said for a while now, is I believe in winter that things are going to slow down. And this is what, so far, we are seeing. So we are mid-December, and you can see that we are below half of what we did see in November. So maybe we will see a reduction in this. Again, this is just working off the deep state numbers, and we will see in a second, the deep state in some fronts is showing significantly different to someone like Syriac. But I won't be surprised at all if we do see a slowdown. It doesn't mean there's any less fighting, it doesn't mean there's any less intensity, but it does mean more movements are going to be on foot rather than armoured vehicles. But I believe destruction is going to increase from things like guided munitions, like FABs, and artillery, because things are going to be slower, or moving slower. They're going to be more stationary. Therefore, that the destruction is going to be high, and that's what's so important. Ukraine need to get on top of, first and foremost, fortifications. Secondly, trying to have some way of limiting the amount of those guided munitions that are dropped, whether it is targeting the plane or long-range strikes to target airfields, some way of that. But let's have a look here. Of course, we have Ukraine in the centre, the capital of Kyiv. Red areas occupied since 22, the purple since 2014. Now, I'm not really sure how I'm going to do this today, but I will do it the best we can. So we do see a little bit of blue popping up on this map as well, of areas that Ukraine has fought back through. So firstly, let's, I don't even know, it's so hard when we have a couple of days, but let's step down. This is the most important front. This is your Pokrovsk sector, all the way down through Kurakhove as well. And you can see that in areas like Zelenivka, then coming under some level of control today, and further out towards Pokrovsk. But what I want to do is just step back. So let's step back to when I last spoke to you. I think it was maybe that second update. So the 14th, we see a large close up around Uspenivkia, as well as movement out through Shevchenko. And then let's step up to the 15th. We just see a little bit in the center of Kurakhove. And then we step up to today, and you can see where these movements are being made. So let's zoom in on some of these areas. Firstly, we'll talk about Pokrovsk, the sector, of course, trying to move out and have an envelopment of Pokrovsk-Minograd. That's what we think will occur anyway. There's more rumors again that Russian motorcycle recon elements are moving further and further towards Pokrovsk. But of course, this is the direction we are looking at. And we can see this Novotrotsky, this is it right here, from further movement shown by Syriac out to the west. And then here's next map update. You can line up where like Zeleny is, where this train line is running. Remember, the train line is going to be a very dangerous position for Ukraine, as Russia can use this as a element of defense to move along that, and that's exactly what we saw in Selyadov. But Russian army took control of positions south of Zeleny, so Zeleny in here, moving up and occupying areas here. On the other hand, Ukrainian army counterattacked this line in the Shevchenko area and managed to recapture some positions. So there was a counterattack in here and did recapture some positions just along this tree line in here, is what Syriac was saying on day 1024. And then we step up, and the Russian army, then he's saying he's recaptured these positions around Shevchenko, and new advances out to the west of this Novotroitsky in here too, as well as further south near Pushkini. Remember that all of this, see where this like dip comes down here? Syriac is saying that that is closed off and moving further and further out from Pushkini. Now, we need to talk then just south of here, and we have then Kurakhove, and I have a geolocation to show. Remember, over a couple of days, we've seen this step up and up. Now, confirming where this is sitting today, we do have this geolocated footage. So just right on the tip of here, we see there's footage here, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing again. We see these, I believe, Russian forces then running up, moving very quickly through this area. You can see the snow on the ground. This is a good way to get a bearing of if footage is new or old, is there snow on the ground. But we see in the end of this footage then these Russian forces pulling down Ukrainian flags and then placing one of their unit battle flags up here after fighting through those areas in Kurakhove. So further movement up. Now, let's have a look here. So day 1023, we have then just see the trine line is to the north of Beretsky, more pushing by the Russian forces to the west of here, and as well as to Sontnivskaya out to the northwest, more ground being made also. And then we see the centre of Kurakhove, a fair bit of this coming under control, especially out to the south and more to the north as well. Then let's go to then the next map. We see more of a push out from Zoroya. So Zoroya is just in the top right here of my cursor. So more of a push out from Zoroya. This, of course, showing much different. I believe that this will close up down towards Stary Turny. Will we see a push south of Stary Turny? It's going to depend on the dam there. But in Pivdeni, which is just to the south of Kurakhove, that all coming under control, and a fair bit more control in the centre, of course, of Kurakhove. And then to today's map update, we can see that a fair part of Kurakhove has come under control. So if we just have a bit of a look and zoom in here, just to really nitpick, see where this green area is here along these little docks, that it's basically cutting all the way just through here, is saying is under Russian control as they've moved through and through. What I will be interested in looking at is exactly what I was interested about Selyadov, is how destroyed does the city actually look? And we saw Bakhmut, Avdiivka, these areas were completely destroyed. There was nothing, and we see that in Volchansk too. But in Selyadov, in areas where Russia has been moving faster, you can see this. Yes, there's a lot of destruction, of course, a lot more than the eye can see. You walk around an area like this, it will not do it justice. But, and this is the main central building, I should say, here in Kurakhove, but it's not the same flattening. What to me says there's less resistance, therefore less artillery being used, and movement faster. That's what I am reading into that. Now let's push south of here, and of course we have what I'm calling the Ilinkia front, or Uspanivka, but this pocket that developed down in here. And what I showed you before was over the past days, especially from the 13th to 14th, that massive close up of area in here. So if we go from here to here, 3 kilometers. So we'll move into the north as there was large changes to Dalnay, Zerenivkia, these areas more closing up very quickly actually on this front. So we have the first one of these Ilinkia maps. We see just this movement towards then Hanivkia as well, slight movement, and a pulling out of some of the Ukrainian forces in here that were surrounded at one point. And then, that's the wrong one, apologies. And then we have up to the date, the most recent map in here. Now, this is telling us a different picture, because let's have a look where this road is running. So this road is running right through here. What Suryak is saying is that this has all fully closed up. Russian army eliminate Ukrainian army salient of east of this road and took control of Hanivka, Uspanivka, and Trudove. So all of these areas have come under control. That's what Suryak is saying. As well as 2 important trench systems along the road. In addition, Russian forces re-entered this Konstantin, I won't do it, and captured half the locality. So this locality in here that we know Ukraine had a successful pushback against, at least according to Suryak maps. So saying that this has closed up, and I won't be surprised if we do see this close up on the Deep State map very soon. Again, I still believe Deep State does trickle feed in some maps to buffer how this is looking. This is very concerning, this movement out to here as well, that we see today to a distance of approximately 3.8 kilometers. Now, this is another very, very interesting thing that has that has occurred over the last, say, couple of days. So the biggest thing we saw, and I spoke about this, when Russia was out near Novaya Komar, I said Ukraine need to have a counterattack to push them out of here, because you can't just have one reasonable road as the conditions in the ground deteriorates. And we saw Ukraine conduct a successful offensive into here. But what we have seen today, and then we turn this back on. Oh, sorry. We turn that back on. We can see that Russia was able to re-enter Novaya Komar, of course, cutting off, not strategically, but physically cutting off 2 of these. The worst position here, easy for Russia, is able to get this, but Veliki Novosilivka is very, very important. But to the south as well, near Blahatny, near Makarivka, you can see how Russia, this green, this is the remaining elements of Ukraine's 2023 counteroffensive, is getting absorbed fairly quickly in here and has cut off these forces down in Makarivka. I don't know exactly what's happening here, but this down in there is a very bad fucking spot if you're a soldier right here, right now. It's very bad. You can see this developing, enveloping these areas, and you can see that Velika Novosilka is getting enveloped, well, I wouldn't even say slowly, because we're in an element of protracted war, attritional war. This is some of these movements. You're talking a couple of kilometers. That is very quickly in a war like this. And you can see, I don't even think that Syriac shows it as extreme as what's happening, and he's not showing this movement near Novaya Komar either, so he's not showing as severe as it is, and I'm more likely to believe this deep state because that is the Ukrainian map. It'll try and show the best thing for the Ukrainian side. You can see, but in the same areas, Blahatny and out on this northeastern push too, that getting enveloped around there, and I think that will be an area of which we need to watch for the coming time. Now, we showed you this. We need to move up again. This is a little bit difficult because I'm dealing over separate days, but we can see there was a shift in Chassiv Yar here. We have just a little bit of red developing. Again, I still believe that most of this area through here is red under control. Let's have a look. Syriac. Now, he's showing a successful Ukrainian counterattack into these warehouses here. Refractory plants, some positions. Ukraine was successful in attacking through there. Again, it can't be shown because if it was never shown the other way, you can't show it back. And then we come down just south of here. Then we have the Toretsk front. Let's skip back a couple of days. No real change in here. But of course, I'll show you the Syriac maps. Now, things in here are moving very slowly out through the Tedecoms in here. And this is an area which is, of course, vitally important. It is incredibly strategically important, and more ground being made. Again, basically what Syriac is showing is that the grey zone in here is the red zone, but it's going to be hard to get an exact idea in there. Not much footage is coming out, and there's so much street-to-street fighting, it can be very difficult to get a really clear idea. Now, let's turn this back on and have a look. Now, you can see some blue up in here. Ukraine did have a successful counterattack near Kolenizkia, but I want to look at something that occurred prior. So, we see this in just to the south of Lozova, we can see this spire develop. Now, at the least, it is 4.4 kilometers. That is a long way. I don't know how long that is in miles, but at the extreme, it's 6 kilometers. That is a long way. Like, that is a really long way, especially in this war. The reason for this is because this was allowed to reach out from Pishani to these areas near Senkove, and of course this has cut off the logistics. So Russia is trying to then envelop a large area in here, and the reason we see this counterattack in here is Ukraine will be trying to clear down through Kryvkia to try and reopen this to help and save the guys that potentially could get stuck in there. But we have seen that is a large shift over the past couple of days in here, and that Ukrainian attack as well there. So let's talk about this, and we do have a few different sort of areas to look at. Of course, Syriac is showing that a lot of this is closing up in this area around Lozova as well to the north, closing up. And remember, Berestov was the front line only very recently. And then we have this. Now, what Syriac is showing here is this prong that we saw push out to where this paddock, where this tree line is in the paddock there. But then we also need to come up just north of here and talk about then around the Sinkivka front line. Of course, we saw Russia push back across the Oskil, but they crossed in 2 positions. Now, we can see, I don't know if I reported this or not. No, I didn't. On the 15th, Russia actually further expanded its bridgehead across here, which is concerning and should be of concern. This crossing over here shown by Syriac's top map. And this began the assault first houses of Dorivshnia. This is this area here. Advantage of the forest cover and avoiding the adjacent heights. At present, troops in these positions are trying to break through the Rakovo district under heavy fighting. So we will see exactly what happens in here, but I would hazard a guess that this should be, well, not hazard a guess, I am saying that that should be of great concern in that area, an area we haven't seen move for some time, but is very important up in Kharkiv. Now, something that needs to be said is I believe that we will see Russia go balls to wall to try and get as much territory as possible on the negotiating table if that comes. But again, what I might show you later is I don't know if Russia's even that interested in negotiating. So let's step back here. Now, no changes up in Kursk. We know there's a hell of a lot of fighting. That footage and I showed you before of those soldiers moving in the open, claimed North Koreans, and then the corpse on the ground is claimed to be in Kursk as well. So you're just going to have to bear with me. They continue advancing in the farms up in the northeast, so up in this area, continually pushing back. Now, remember, there's bits on this map on Surak that aren't even shown, that are under Ukrainian control by Surak, but not by Deep State. So up and around this sector here, it's hard because of the labelling is so poor. But then we come down to the south of Pokrovsk. We see that the Russian army continue advancing towards Guevo along the border. So they're going along the border here. But also they've expanded across, like we reported last time, across into Sumy Oblast too, which is the gravest concern in here, is that Ukraine can't hold this and that Russia push across into Sumy. But remember, there's one real road into Suja and out is right here. Again, moving along this border, it can become very dangerous. And I believe in winter it's going to become much, much worse. I can't see Ukraine not pulling out of here in winter. Well, I can see them not pulling out of here in winter, but strategically, it doesn't make sense to me in a protracted attritional war where other areas are falling like we've seen at 5 to 6 kilometre advancements. Go out, 6 kilometres is like 4 miles. Just walk that in a straight line. You'll get an idea of how fucking far that actually is, and further positions up in the north falling area as well, near Kamishka, captured farms of Nadev. So around in this sector here, I won't get any what are they called, like logos of areas, but it's right in around this sector. So look, fuck this. I'm going to talk about this tomorrow. But basically what I want to go over is what exactly Mark Rutte has actually said in his speech. There's some very important stuff. And over this 3-hour interview between Professor Mearsheimer and Alexander Dugin, and how there's parts in that actually relate to what the Secretary of NATO has said. And I believe that is something very important, and I want to go over that on a larger scale strategic of how Russia may see it, how the West sees it, and where things are aligning, and where I believe there's misunderstanding of how Russia and China see their rise to power. I'm not saying that these countries don't see a rise to power. I think they do, but I think it's the exact opposite of what, especially China. I think China believes they will rise to power without firing a shell. That's what I believe, and that's why I believe that is ultimately why Dugin was targeted to be killed, is because the only thing more dangerous than nuclear weapons is ideology. And ideology, and of course everything's ideology, democracy is an ideology, communism is an ideology, but the strength of that is unbelievable, and I believe that's why he was targeted. And this is why throughout the Cold War there was such push to try and stop communism spreading through areas, especially maybe through areas like Southeast Asia too, and this new ideology forming. But I want to take away one takeaway before we cut off the video, and I'll speak about this in length tomorrow. But Mearsheimer, whether you agree with him or not, you cannot say that he isn't very intelligent. He argues that strategy isn't about what you think. It's about being able to understand what your adversary is thinking. And I think that is a really good takeaway in all of this. Legends. You have a fantastic day. I'm going to go to the couch. If there's anything crappy in this video, I'm not going to edit it too much. Thank you. Thanks for dealing with everything that I've got going on too. Bye-bye.